A mother's love is eternal until it's shattered by her own daughter's betrayal. Clara, bearing the scar from brain surgery, lay alone, abandoned by the very person who should have stood beside her. The wound Elise left behind cut deeper than any knife ever could. Elise was meant to be there, her mother's lifeline through the darkness of that operation, but she chose someone else's happiness over her own mother's survival. And the price for Elise's betrayal would be paid with something neither of them could ever escape. Before we dive deep into this dramatic story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming tales. And leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. With my head wrapped in bandages and the pain of brain surgery throbbing like a far-off wave, the hospital room was a frigid temple of buzzing equipment and antiseptic light. I was 70 years old and named Clara. I was looking for my daughter Elise, who had vowed to be here, but she was lying defenseless, a widow who had carried the weight of the world alone. She had assured me that she would support me despite the fear of a benign tumor behind my right eye that was pushing on nerves that may cause a stroke or blindness. Rather, weeks before, she had phoned with a strained tone, saying that she had to attend a crucial work meeting in Seattle since her job depended on it. With the love of a mother, I muttered, "Okay," and swallowed the untruth when she replied, "I'll come right after." Her delight was a knife in my soul when I saw her on Instagram 3 days later, beaming in a Minnie Mouse headband, laughing in Disney World, and pushing her mother-in-law's wheelchair. I sent a single incisive text: "I hope the procession drowned out your guilt." I didn't cry or beg. With that, I ignited the catalyst for her demise. 6 months prior, when an MRI tech's quiet voice drew me back with his overly cautious look, the darkness had infiltrated my life. The world was a blur. The noises were harsher, and my eyesight was curling at the edges like burning paper as I drove home. "There's a mass behind your right eye," he said. "You need a neurosurgeon now." A doctor with a voice like polished glass described the condition in a modern office: benign but aggressive squeezing nerves that may cause blindness, convulsions, or worse. "We need to complete the surgery within 8 weeks. I nodded, my grin a front, but on the inside, I was falling apart with Elise, my only child, as my confidant, and her existence a faraway shore I could no longer approach. Since Elise's father disappeared when she was 7 years old, I had been raising her by myself. I had worked triple shifts in hospital administration to pay for Elise's graphic design degree, and I sold my mother's pearls to cover her ballet lessons, never mentioning the expense. To me, love was unrecorded sacrifice that stepped in where others failed. She texted and sent Christmas cards, so we weren't strangers, but there was a barrier between us. I could only see pictures of her life in Chicago with her husband Nathan and their 8-year-old daughter Mia, but I was never asked to enter. I had not used the words, "Elise, I need you," in decades when I phoned, my voice shaking. She responded warmly, saying, "Mom, I'll be there. Just name the date." I said, "Last March," referring to the time when my surgery was scheduled, and she promised to stay for the week to support me during my recuperation. I prepared by ironing her old quilt stocking, her favorite chai, and hanging fairy lights in the guest room for Mia, as a wave of relief washed over me, and the tightness in my chest began to dissolve. Her tone was too loud, a practiced lilt that made my heart race, when she called 3 weeks before the procedure. I prepared myself as she remarked, "Mom, there's a hitch." Nathan's employer had scheduled a career-defining conference in Seattle that was required for spouses as well. With a feeble apology, she murmured, "It's terrible timing," adding, "I'll be there the moment it's over." I gripped the phone, feeling a deep silence as my thoughts screamed, recuperation isn't optional. Brain surgery doesn't stop. However, after years of her first tying me to her justifications, I answered, "I understand," in a ghostly voice. As I hung up, the stillness weighed more than the tumor shattering my confidence in her. The operation left me raw, my head throbbing, my throat scraped from the breathing tube, the world a blur of painkillers and anxiety. I packed alone, signed my advance directive with my neighbor Ruth as witness, and arrived at the hospital, the pity of the receptionist burning as I murmured, "I'm alone." I woke up to bright lights and nurses with no one to hold. My heart was searching the room for Elise, wondering if she had given me a second thought, so I hardly heard the surgeon say that the tumor was gone. 3 days after my discharge, I stumbled home in a medical cab with Ruth's arms supporting me. Her generosity was a reflection of my loneliness. I opened Instagram that night, propped up against cushions, my body screaming, hoping to find a way out, only to be betrayed by Elise, who was shining at Disney rather than Seattle, her laughter mocking, pushing Nathan's mother Diane in a wheelchair with the caption, "Magic Moments 2025. With a shaking hand, I sent a single blazing text. "I hope the parade numbed your conscience." As I sat with my head bandaged, the agony of surgery felt like a faint echo compared to the searing pain of my daughter Elise's betrayal. In that stillness, my house became a sacred river flowing around me. Her pledge to accompany me for the excision of a tumor behind my right eye had fallen through, and in its place was a fabrication about a work conference in Seattle, which was exposed by an Instagram picture of her grinning while pushing her mother-in-law Diane's wheelchair at Disney World. My text message, "Hope the parade drowned out your conscience," had set her on edge. Her voicemails streamed with justifications, but I allowed them to fade into silence, my heart hardened by resolve. I felt the storm building, Elise and her husband Nathan's desperation sharpening like a sword. But my anchor was the red folder on my dining table, weighed down by screenshots, medical documents, and my canceled $1,500 monthly payment to her account. "Mom, it wasn't planned," was Elise's first message, a shaky appeal in a ragged quilt of a voice. Disney tickets were a surprise gift from Nathan's parents. I was unable to refuse. Her comments concealed her decision to prioritize Diane's wishes over my own safety. I chose not to reply, not out of malice, but rather to allow her to feel the weight of her departure and the void she had left in my healing. Then she texted me urgently, begging, "Are you okay? Talk to me." "Mom, please," but I put my phone on mute, using the silence as a healing canvas. For years, I had supported her by transferring money for Mia's dancing lessons and selling my car to pay for her wedding, all without ever asking for thanks. I no longer carried their burden. I accessed my banking app the following morning while sipping chamomile tea, my hands more steady from the medicines. The $1,500 transfer, Nathan's faltering design contracts, Mia's education, and the lifeline I'd provided each month to relieve their mortgage, all looked back at me. With a single touch, I severed the connection that bound me to their expectations without any prior notice or note. By midday, Nathan's email reached Clara in a formal yet icy tone. The transfer failed. "Is anything wrong?" There was only a covert request for money, with no reference to my procedure or my scalp being sutured. The clarity of his perspective that I was a resource, not a mother, made my chest clench, not because I was in anguish. I blocked his address and erased the email, and Elise texted, "Mom, is the payment stuck?" I answered, "I'm getting better. This month there is no money." She responded with a barrage of information about their impending vehicle payment, Mia's recital fees, and mounting debts, but she said nothing about my loneliness or my health. The silence grew deeper, a place where I started to recover my soul. After going to the market, I purchased some sage and a tiny clay pot, and I burned the herb to purify my house as the smoke curled like a prayer. Ruth, my neighbor, was polite and offered muffins, but I kept Elise's treachery a secret since it was too recent to discuss. Rather, I included a snapshot of Elise's most recent Instagram post, which said, "Some betrayals cut deeper than knives," and her martyr act, which caused people to feel sorry for her. In my journal, I wrote that she tells falsehoods. I get stronger. I braced myself like a hawk eyeing the horizon, because I knew Elise and Nathan wouldn't give up. Their need for my money would push them to take risks. I lit a candle that night, its flame alight in my loneliness, while the sage smoke hung in the air. I wrote in my journal, I cut their chains today. I get up tomorrow. The words ignited the ashes of my trust and served as a promise. I was no longer Elise's shadow. Instead, I was the fire blazing brightly prepared to face her next blow. As I stood firmly against the storm of my daughter Elise's betrayal, I felt grounded by the sage's smoke, which permeated the silence in my house like a spirit's breath. My heart was hardened by her absence during my brain surgery and by her deception about a conference in Seattle, which was revealed by her celebration with her mother-in-law, Diane, at Disney World. My text, I hope the parade drowned out your conscience, along with the canceled $1,500 monthly transfer, had shaken her. Her voicemails and texts were a frantic request for money and forgiveness, but I refused to speak my red folder brimming with evidence, including hospital records, Instagram posts, and Nathan's cold email requesting payment. I saw their next move coming violent as a thunderhead, and I braced myself, my spirit a rooted oak, immovable, while the candle's flame danced on my table. Elise's silence shattered violently. A few days after I last communicated with her, a video of Elise appeared on Facebook, showing her with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling voice. When the people you love the most leave you, it destroys something that words cannot fix. With her daughter Mia in her arms, she snapped a picture of their faces with the remark, "Family is what shows up." Hugs, prayers, and indignation at the anonymous traitor were expressed by friends, co-workers, and even members of my former book club in the comments that flooded in. "Clara, is this about you?" One of the texts that flooded my phone came from my neighbor Ruth and my sister June. Elise portrayed me as the callous one by disregarding my years of sacrifice and my surgery causing the story to spread like wildfire. Even though my chest hurt, my mother's advice to avoid dancing in their dust persisted over time. She tells tales I noted in my diary after saving the movie and adding it to the red folder. The planet is in my hands. With a brazen, unrepentant knock at twilight, the storm hit harder. Nathan was wearing a leather jacket that was too fresh for their alleged problems, and I could see his jaw set through the peephole. With a voice as smooth as a river stone yet steely below, he shouted out, "Clara, we need to talk." With my surgical bandage serving as a sharp reminder of my suffering, I unlocked the inner door while keeping the screen shut. His eyes scanned my house like a ledger, and he hardly gave it a glance. He pointed to their car where she was sitting, with her face buried in her phone and avoiding my stare, and added, "Elise is outside." I remained mute, my presence a wall, and he continued, his tone changing to one of fake kindness. "She's too hurt to face you?" "This silent treatment is unfair," he added, adding that Mia's school expenses were mounting, the mortgage was past due, and Elise was collapsing. "It's not who you are to stop the money." I maintained my stance, but his remarks ignited a reaction within me like a spark to dry grass. "Clara, let's be plain," he said, leaning in and speaking in a low voice. "Our future does not include you. It was helpful when the situation was simple, but it became a hassle when you needed assistance. Elise no longer views you as her mother in the ways that count." The words weren't just his. They also included Elise's rhythm, refined in late-night conversations, and a judgment on my life. My face was still, but my heart trembled. I responded sharply, "That's obvious enough," and then I closed the door, the latch clicking like a promise. Their automobile pulled away, leaving me alone in the kitchen, with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. My hands were steady, but my spirit was full of clarity and rage. I opened my will that evening, the crimson binder bearing witness to my determination. I redirected my little money to a young art program, a wildlife refuge I had previously supported, and a domestic violence shelter after carefully erasing Elise's name. "I gave you my heart, my years, and my strength," I wrote in a letter and sealed it. "You abandoned me to die by myself. You picked your route, and your legacy is mine. I felt the ground move under me, hardening as I burnt another bundle of sage, its smoke curling like a plea for liberation. I was the tempest rising to meet Elise and Nathan as their desperation increased and their falsehoods became more audible. Clara. I stood strong, my heart, a tempered sword, formed in the fire of my daughter Elise's treachery, while the hallowed smoke of sage hung in my home like a curtain. Our relationship had been broken by her absence during my brain surgery and her fabrication of a conference in Seattle that was disguised by her happiness at Disney World with her mother-in-law, Diane. Their concern was triggered by my text message. I hope the parade drowned out your conscience. Elise's Facebook video, which portrayed me as a callous abandoner, and Nathan's harsh remarks at my door, "You're not her mother anymore," which echoed her conclusion. Their desperation was a swelling flood, and I braced myself a rock against the pounding surf, but the red folder filled with screenshots, medical records, and my revised will was my castle. Elise's following move was a brilliant maneuver. Her Instagram was flooded with pictures of her and 8-year-old Mia making cookies with the remark, "Healing through love despite betrayal." A week after Nathan's visit. Her calligraphy was purposefully weak, and the last slide was a handwritten remark that read, "When family cuts you off, you find strength in what remains." Comments poured in. Elise, "You're so courageous," from random people her yoga class, and even Lila, a former co-worker, who texted, "Clarissa, how could you?" People portrayed me as a villain who had abandoned a struggling mother and child, and the untruth quickly spread. My grandmother's words, "Let their storm pass," reverberated in my soul while my chest burned. "The mountain is yours." I wrote in my diary, "She crafts a mask," after saving the entry and adding it to the red folder. I donned my truth. At daybreak, the wave broke with a gentle but firm tap. Through the peephole, I could see Elise by herself, with a canvas tote draped over her shoulder, a thin face, and no sign of Mia. With a frail voice, she begged out, "Mom, please!" When I opened the door, my surgical cover was off, but the scar on my scalp remained a silent witness. Eyes flashing, she entered and sat at the kitchen table holding the bag tightly like a lifeline. She sobbed as she muttered, "I apologize for lying about Seattle." Disney was always present. Her voice faltered, but I caught a glimpse of the new wristwatch she was wearing, its price tag standing in sharp contrast to her entreaty. "I thought you'd be fine, that I could make everyone happy," she declared. "We are drowning under the weight of the mortgage, Mia's school expenses, and Nathan's failing business." At the mention of Mia, my heart faltered, but the watch and the practiced tears helped me focus. "Are you filming with a voice as steady as a riverbed?" I inquired. Her gaze expanded before settling on the tote, where the shape of a phone shone dimly. She stumbled, "I just needed proof in case you turned me away." Her revelation ignited my determination. I nodded at the watch and remarked, "You brought a prop and a script." She gripped the tote and said, "Mia is your granddaughter. Get out, don't discipline her. Mia is your daughter," I said as I moved closer, my voice a soft thunder. "Raise her with truth, not lies." She stood, her tears drying, and walked away, the click of the door sealing the armor of my heart. After lighting a bundle of sage, whose smoke purified her deceit, I added the meeting to the red folder. Elise's visit, manipulative, documented. Ruth came over with a dish that afternoon, her eyes weary. She said that Elise appeared broken while she was in the drugstore. I nodded, my face as serene as a lake, but I could see the fractures growing within their world, coming apart just as mine had. "They say Nathan's firm is insolvent." With no commentary, only proof, I forwarded the contents of the red folder, screenshots, medical records, and Elise's texts to June, Lila, and my book club. June called in a quiet voice, saying, "She lied to us all." Elise's story was beginning to unravel. I wrote that their wave breaks after they light another candle, with its flame serving as a beacon. I remain unfazed. I was prepared a warrior forged from truth and sorrow, but their next move would be desperate. A tenuous calm took the place of the storm's echoes. I moved to a one-bedroom apartment near the Puget Sound a few days after Elise's visit, where the balcony was caressed by salt air and the walls were immaculate. By getting in touch with a housing advocate, Ruth knew I was able to find a lease that was affordable for my pension. I took only a few things: David's old watch, the red folder, and one picture of Elise when she was 12, her smile unguarded, and left the house where I had tended to my wounds. I felt the earth settle beneath me as I arranged my new space, placing a driftwood sculpture by the windowsill. Its calm power rose like spring sap. On my first night, I made a self-promise to burn sage and name the flat sanctuary. Elise's public campaign was unsuccessful. After I delivered the truth in the red folder to important allies, the community's compassion for her most recent Instagram story, which was a vague learning to let go, declined, and it received few likes. With the kind words, "We see you, Clara," my book group sent me an email encouraging me to return. I stored the message as a seed for later, but I haven't replied yet. Then a letter arrived tucked beneath my former door and sent by Ruth. Elise's handwriting was rough, and it read, "I've lost Nathan, our home. Mia is with me. I'm trying, but I don't expect you to care." There was only a slight request and no reference to money. But I could see Mia's smile in the words, and it made me wonder what may be saved rather than forgiving her. I wrote, "She reaches out, but I choose my own path," and tucked it inside my diary. The next week, I enrolled in a pottery class where Sarah, a retired nurse with eyes like river stones, guided me while my hands molded clay. She added, "You shape the clay, it shapes you," and I nodded as I felt my life begin to take shape. I created a little bowl, its flaws a reflection of me, and set it on my balcony as a symbol of optimism. Elise texted me one evening when I was drinking tea. "Can I see you?" Elise only asked for time without making any requests. Although her history still weighs heavily on me, there was something distinct and unpretentious about her statements that made me stop. I answered, "Sunday, meet me at the pier." There was an air of transparency, yet she offered no guarantees. On Sunday, the pier was bustling with birds and wind. Elise showed up early by herself with her coat tattered and makeup free like Mia at a friend's. The water was a restless observer as she sat on a worn seat across from me. "I left Nathan," she continued softly, "because he wanted me to put his mother and his life before you." Her eyes met mine, unscripted and raw. "I lied about Disney to avoid his fight, but it cost me you." I listened with a wary heart, and instead of seeing the betrayed daughter, I saw a woman struggling with her own decisions. "I don't expect you to trust me, but I want to try for Mia for me." "We don't give trust, we build it," I said. Elise nodded, a tiny gleam in her eyes, and we parted ways, the thunder of the sea, a sign of what was to come. Show up, Elise, as yourself, not as a role. With a letter to my lawyer that said, "If challenged, release all evidence," I revised my will once again after returning home and included a tiny amount of money for Mia's future, but not Elise's. I stood on my balcony, the beat of the sound my own, and hung a picture from the pier market that depicted a wave cresting beneath a gloomy sky. Elise started coming around on Sundays with coffee, and occasionally Mia, who would give me hugs and talk about school. Instead of reconstructing the past, we began a new, honest, and delicate journey, where two ladies learned to look past their prior hurts. In my journal, I wrote, "The storm is over. I am sufficient. I am the silence." What do you think about this story? If you've ever felt belittled, used, or betrayed by your own family, you probably understand all too well the pain this mother went through. It wasn't just about losing money. It was the kind of betrayal that tightens your chest and makes your heart ache. But just like her, we all have the right to say enough, to stand up and reclaim our worth and our voice. If you found this story thought-provoking, Please share it with your friends or family. Someone out there might need this reminder that they deserve respect. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next story's real-life lessons that can be raw and painful but need to be told. Thank you for watching and listening.